Grace and Peace. I'm Brian Musser, the Baptist Campus Minister at Drexel University, and this is Peace and Power Bible Study, the peace of Jesus Christ to change your life, the power of the Holy Spirit to change the world. And we are doing our series on good news. The gospel is good news for every person and every part of life. Now, last session we talked about how the gospel saved us, is saving us, and will save us. But we're going to look at some scriptures along that side, and specifically one passage that is very interesting, but is a little bit complicated. And so we're going to start just reading the passage in the Holman. This is 2 Corinthians 1, 8 through 11. And it's Paul talking about his time in Asia to the Corinthian church. For we don't want you to be unaware, brothers, of our affliction that took place in Asia. We were completely overwhelmed, beyond our strength, so that we even despaired of life. Indeed, we personally had a death sentence within ourselves, so that we would not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a terrible death, and he will deliver us. We have put our hope in him that he will deliver us again, while you join in helping us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gift that came to us through the prayers of many. So in this one verse, in verse 10, you see this same thing being said three sort of different ways. Although it's in Greek, it's in two different tenses. The way it's written just kind of means we're looking at three sort of different things. The first one is the past tense, and it's definitely the past tense. And Paul's talking about how God has been faithful to deliver them from danger in the past. He has delivered us from such a terrible death. And although Paul is intending this to mean a specific, in real time, physical danger that he has been delivered from, he's also looking at it and applying it to being delivered from big D death, the death that sin leads to as well. And then also there's this, he will deliver us. But because Paul's in danger again, and on mission trips, Paul was always in danger, and he had confidence because God had delivered him, that God will deliver him this time. And so God's faithfulness in the past allowed Paul to trust in God's faithfulness in the present. And then both of these meant that he totally and completely trusts God, whatever comes in the future, whatever is on its way. And Paul would live a life in such a way that that just depended upon God delivering him over and over again, whenever it was necessary. Paul trusted on the deliverance of God. Before that, Paul knew God would deliver him now, and it was all dependent upon how God had treated him in the past and continued to deliver him throughout. This verse is very interesting and translated in a bunch of different ways. I just want to highlight some of these translations because of the way it plays with the verb tenses and actually translates the this verse. This is 2 Corinthians 1:10, King James Version, who delivered us from so great a death and doth deliver, in whom we trust that he will yet deliver us. King James pulling out an old school, old English version of doth, but just seeing that delivered, does deliver, will yet deliver. New Century Version, God saved us from these great dangers of death and will continue to save us. We have put our hope in him and he will save us again. New Revised Standard Version, he who rescued us from some so deadly a peril will continue to rescue us. On him we have set our hope that he will rescue us again. In the New Life Version, yes, God kept us from what looked like sure death, and he is keeping us. As we trust him, he will keep us in the future. There's this idea. I love how these four different versions translates this one verb in 4 different ways: delivered, saved, rescued, kept, all kind of English versions of this one verb. And then how all of them look like it's past, present, and continuing present um, translations of this verb as well. I just find that fascinating, this idea that God has saved us and we can tell stories about God's salvation work in our lives, which means God, whatever we're going through right now, God will save us. We can completely here and now trust and depend upon God's saving action in our lives. And looking forward, because God has saved us and God is saving us, we can trust that no matter what happens in the future, God will save us. This faithfulness of God. God's faithfulness in the past means that we can depend upon God's faithfulness during the present and live a life of hope of God's future faithfulness. Has God been good to you? Do you live your life expecting God's goodness? And is his future goodness something that you're just assured of? This is how salvation affects our past, our present, and our future. We know that God's got us. He has proven that in the past. And God will continue to deliver us, to save us, to keep us. And there is this future hope that no matter what happens, this is all going to end with us in the hands of God. I hope that's your reality. We're going to dig into that a little bit more in the next video, throwing in some big theological words, because this is what we're unpacking here. This 3 tenses of salvation is a very specific theological idea, and we'll unpack that in the next video. Thanks for joining the conversation. You can always join live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom. Weekly wrap-ups on YouTube and WordPress. That information is in the description below. And I am all over social media. Find me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, WordPress, and YouTube. All those description links are in the description as well. Thanks for joining me, and I hope we continue this conversation sometime soon.